Welcome to another episode of the SWISH Show. I'm your host, Ryan Tuckwood, and today is going to be an interesting one as I'm joined by my own head of operations, Mr. Mikel Reel. I have never sat down and done a podcast with any of my team before, so I have absolutely no idea where this is going to go. We've had about 12 minutes worth of giggles before we even got started. However, I'm really excited, mate, because I don't think we've ever sat down we've never sat down like this and just had a conversation and said, mate, take me back, tell me about your journey, how did you get to where you are, and what lessons can we give to our Swish community, because you are somebody that has a lot of interactions with a lot of our clients and has done for many years. So for those of you that don't know you and haven't had the opportunity to be in your presence, mate, who is Mikel Reel? Where does he come from? Give us your little 60-second elevator pitch, I guess, on who you are and your role here at ISR.
Yeah, cool. So obviously I'm Mikel Reel. I'm from the UK originally, and I've been in the country for 6.5 years now. I've spent 4.5 of those with ISR Training, and I've been in virtually every position there is in the company. I'm finally settled for operations, head of ops, and obviously a little bit of accounts in there as well. So I do a little bit of everything. I'm the jack of all trades, so to speak. As you well know, I tend to fill in the gaps and make things work and get things going the way that they should, essentially. So
the glue.
Yeah, that's what I like to think of myself as.
Jack of all trades, been in every single role, blessing or curse?
Both at times, because I know so much about the business, it can sometimes be a curse, because I think when we're trying to make a decision, for example, operationally, I know everything that's going to happen, so it can take a little bit longer to make decisions. But on the flip side of that, I also know how it's going to affect everybody else's role and what sort of things are going to happen on the back of decisions that we do make. And I can empathise as well with everybody. I know the sorts of things that they're going to be going through on a daily basis, how they may be feeling, and because I've been in that role as well, I can relate a lot to people as well inside the business.
Yeah, awesome. And you can see that as well, like you're the sort of go-to grandfather / mid-20s sort of confidant, really, because people can open up to you. But we're going to come back to that in a second. Before we do, mate, I want to know more about Mikel Reel you said from England. Get a bit more granular with us with that. So whereabouts do you come from? Talk to us about your background growing up.
Yeah, okay, cool. How deep do you want to go?
That question makes me nervous. As comfortable as you feel going. As you know, the values here at this company are transparency, inspiration, and integrity. So you can be as transparent as you want.
Yeah, cool. So I'm from Worcestershire in England. Most people know it as where the source comes from, even though when I tell people that, they still don't know geographically where Worcester's actually located. But
Shakespeare country?
Yeah, it is indeed. I have a brother that I grew up with. I've got two brothers and one sister, but one brother and the sister live in Essex, a couple of hours away from us. And it was me, my mum, and my brother growing up. We grew up in council housing, so the equivalent of, what do they call it over here? Can't remember what it's called.
I guess it's government support housing, same sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, so we grew up without too much, you know. My mum always tried her best. She worked so many jobs and she did her best to give us everything that we needed, but we didn't have the best start, so to speak. There wasn't a lot around us financially, I guess. But her focus was to always make sure we were happy, to give us everything that we needed within her remit, of course, and to give us one holiday per year. That was always a focus of Mum's, was to make sure that we had one holiday per year, which was cool.
Is that an overseas holiday?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. Obviously, over in the UK, everywhere's so close. It's so easier to get places. So that was something we were always grateful for. My mum and dad were divorced very early. I think I was about 3 or 4 years old. So Dad was there, but we didn't have an active relationship. He wasn't really involved in me growing up, I guess. So went to school in it's called Christopher Whitehead Language College these days, and I was always somebody that I was actually part of a gifted and talented club. So I was naturally gifted with being able to take on board information. I was quite intelligent. I was quite a smart young man. I like to think I still am. And because of that, I never had to try to achieve anything. I always just went to school, did the tests and sort of passed and got everything that I needed to. So I left school with some really good grades, and I then joined college, sixth form college, with the intention of studying to become an architect. So I did A-level maths, A-level physics, A-level French, and there was one more as well, which was sort of a fringe one that I had to do to make up the classes, so to speak. And I went into college with the same mentality. I always expected that I never really had to try, but I would still achieve everything that I wanted to. And that didn't work very well. I failed everything except for French. So I got a D level in French. And for those that are from the UK or understand the grading system, a D level even then isn't that great. It was A star all the way down, and D was just about a pass. So I left college and I went and worked for one of the largest, if not the largest, catalogue order companies in the UK by the name of Littlewoods, or Little Woods, if I pronounce my T's correctly. And that's sort of where I started my working career. I was in customer service. To begin with, I was in a team called WISMO, which stood for Where Is My Order? So I was a Christmas temp.
That's cool.
And yeah, people used to call up and say, where is my order? And I would try and determine whether or not it was going to turn up on time, where it was, whatever it might be.
So you're like a verbal tracker?
Essentially, yeah. I'd jump onto the system, I'd see where it was, which they could also see if they logged into their account, but
yeah.
I'd check where it was, I'd let them know, and then that'd be it really, and I'd wait for the next call to come through, which would be almost immediately at that time of year. We apologise for the technical difficulties there. We will continue now. So WISMO, so I was answering the phone, letting people know where their packages were, and then I did quite well in that position. Like, I can relate to people really well. I've always been able to. I feel like I can have a conversation with almost anybody, which I hope that you would attest to as well. You've seen that, you've witnessed that. So I was then offered a position to stay long term, and with that came further training for inquiries level 1. So it was a little bit more in depth. I was then starting to take payments and starting to sometimes take orders. They used to call it swing. So for example, you would sometimes you'd be chasing people's orders, but if they needed more people to take orders, you would swing and start to take inbound calls for that reason instead. So I did that, and then I was offered a position, or I was asked if I wanted to go through training to be on the email inquiries team. And I did. I enjoyed that. So I very quickly then went into an emails position, and it was the same sort of thing. They were inquiries, but as opposed to on the phone, they would be via email, and we had to answer 11 emails per hour. That was our KPI essentially, and that was where that's how I've got my customer service background is dealing with people in all sorts of different inquiries essentially.
And what sort of training did you get with that then?
There was for the emails, or for all of it.
I think that, as you alluded to, and you're spot on, like, you've got an ability to adapt to all different personality types. You're a bit of a chameleon in that regard. You've definitely got an empath type nature as well, where you take on other people's stress and pressure as well. So is that something that's trained by mum, or where does that come from?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the empathy side of things, I think that is from my upbringing. It's just that in the council estate, like the community housing, there's so many different types of characters.
Yeah.
So I've always been around different people, and I've just learned how to understand and how to read people well. I'm always that guy that you'll have seen it. I can walk into the office and I can tell almost immediately if somebody's off.
Yeah.
And so I've always been quite good at reading body language and understanding people's emotions, whether they're actively showing it or not.
Yeah.
So I think that's learned prior to the customer service training that I undertook. The customer service training was more so how to structure that empathy, I guess, how to actually how to deliver those sorts of techniques, if you get what I'm trying to say.
So how to use it intentionally.
That's what I mean to say. Yeah.
Because for those people that don't know, living on a council estate, they're notoriously known in the UK as being rough, and it's all people that, like, say, low socio-economic background. Yeah. parents might not have jobs, they don't have the nicest things. I don't come from that background, so this is full stereotype right now. I imagine there would be some rough and ready people that you would be liaising and hanging around with, but I know you as a deeply caring, sensitive individual, and I'm not saying they're not, right? But so you've learned from a young age to be able to deal with both types, right?
Yeah, I always felt like I never really fit in, so to speak. So there are heaps of different people around me, and rough is the best word for it. I've got family members that have been to jail, I've got family members that have sold drugs, I've got family members that have been involved in naughty things, so to speak, you know, and I was always around that life. Like, drugs and violence was just around me virtually every single day. So yeah, there was a lot of that, but I never really connected with it. Like, being violent was never really my cup of tea. I never wanted to be that person. If you never got your way where I'm from, then you would induce violence, and you'd sort of be that person to be an alpha and sort of get the things that you want, and I was never like that.
Anybody ever violent to you?
Not that I remember, not really. Because, again, I was able to relate to most people, so I could fit in quite quickly, and there wasn't really any sort of animosity towards me when I was growing up.
This is why I wanted to have conversations with, obviously, all of you at ISR. I think it works really well for our audience to understand the team behind the organisation, put some faces to the names. But for me, it's the ability to communicate with people, which is what we teach, sales and communication, right? Enables you to get ahead in all walks of life. And whether you knew it or not back then, your ability to communicate probably meant that you weren't getting picked on. Whether that was the way you carried yourself, your physiology, your body language, the words that you were using, for some reason they just didn't come near you. And it ain't because you're a massive 6'3" bloke, right?
Well, I'm pretty.
If you listen to the podcast, yes, it is.
I agree with that. I've always just been a respectful person. Manners and politeness is something that is very, very big for me, very close to my heart. And treating people, it's the golden rule, isn't it? Treat people how you want to be treated. And I think that's so true. Just be nice and be kind to people. And like, there's obviously a line that can be crossed with that. With that comes a perceived naivety in that people can sometimes take advantage of that. So I think it's important to know where your line sits, because you can be nice to people, but you obviously have to get to that point where if you are starting to be taken advantage of, then you need to stop that. You need to change your circumstances, stop hanging around those people, whatever it might be. But I've always gone into any sort of communication or situation with respect and just actually listening to people, and then being able to relate based on the experiences that I've had.
So what takes that person then out of Worcester, living in that environment, for you to go, I'm going to move to the other side of the world? Right? Because I know my journey. I've done the same. When was your, I don't know, was it a crisis point or an inspiration point? What was the decision behind it?
It's two-pronged, really. So there was a gentleman that used to look after me by the name of Dave, one of my mum's really close friends, and I used to go and stay with him at the weekends and all sorts of stuff like that, and he would take care of me whilst mum was working, so she could provide for us. As I mentioned, she works quite a lot. So he had a friend that he used to speak to, and his name was Roy, and he lived in Australia. He lives in Port Macquarie still to this day. And I used to see him on Skype, and I'd chat to him as well, and we'd sort of interact. And just one day, like, I think he threw it out tongue-in-cheek, you can come and stay with me, or you're welcome whenever you want. As you do with people, you can come whenever you want. So I did that, and I was 13 years old at the time, and I had a little...
So you flew over to Australia?
I did, yeah.
13?
Yeah.
Who with?
Initially, Dave came with me, and then he left and did whatever he was doing. And so I travelled back to the UK after that by myself.
Wow.
But in order to get here, I was working at a fruit and veg shop around the corner. They did flowers as well. And I'd take the flowers from the front of the shop, I'd go and put them away in the fridge. It was a massive refrigerator, and that's where all the veg would go as well. And I was paid £2 a day to do that. It was loaded, loads of money, cashed up. And
better than my paper round.
Yeah, I had one of those as well. Mum saved up as well. Like, I told her that I wanted to come over to Australia, and she did her best to put some money away for me too. So we did that, came over with Dave, and I stayed in Port Macquarie for 3 months. I went to school for a month because I was missing school in the UK, so I told them I'd go to school over here. Did that for a month, and then just sort of hung around and took in Australia, I guess, for the next 2 months. And then I went back, and I just knew ever since that experience that this is where I not just wanted but also needed to be. So it was always in the back of my mind. I wanted to come over here, and then obviously I went to college, did all that as I've already mentioned, and started working. And I went through quite a rough time. So I thought I'd found my first love. I hadn't. I was severely taken advantage of because of that naivety I've already told you about. And that was an experience. But I went through that, and we split up, and I went down a real dark path. I found myself addicted to A-class drugs for a number of years. And every single day, that's all I was doing. The money that I had, I was going out, I was spending it on drugs. And
what age was this?
This was at 18.
Yeah.
And Mum had moved to Spain, so she'd also reached her own crisis point, and she needed to go and do things that she'd always thought of and dreamt about doing. So she moved to Spain, and I encouraged that because I wanted her to live the life that she wanted to live, you know. So she went. She left me with the dog, who was allergic to dust, which was a nightmare. So I had a dog, a 3-bedroomed house that I was having to pay the bills on and look after. My shift at work was 1:30 in the afternoon until 11 in the evening. So I'd come home, and it would be pitch black, obviously, and I'd have all these responsibilities, and I wasn't quite mature enough to handle everything that I needed to. So that's why I found myself obviously addicted to the drugs, and I was on that path for about 2 years, and then it did reach that crisis point where I was like, I don't want to live this. I've seen, when I was about 10 years old, my next door neighbour overdosed on heroin and died. He was 15, and there were many family members that were also taking drugs, and I'd seen the lives that they'd created, and it was more of an existence as opposed to actually living a meaningful life, you know. And I decided that I didn't want that for myself. I wanted to go and actually achieve more. So
was there a moment though where you went, I don't want this for myself anymore? Like what was that?
It was when I found out that I was being made redundant from Littlewoods. So we were quite fortunate in that we found out we were being made redundant a year before it actually happened.
So had you held down this job all the way through whilst taking drugs?
Yeah. Sometimes I was going to work on drugs.
Wow.
Most days. And sometimes I was doing drugs at work as well. It was real. It was silly. So found out we were being made redundant, and I knew I was able to calculate how much money I was going to be getting paid, and it was just enough for a ticket and maybe the first couple of weeks of being here. And I was in a relationship with my now fiance Sasha, and we'd been together for a couple of months when we found out, and then no, we actually weren't. We started our relationship after we found out about the redundancy. So we were together for 8 months when we left, but just before me leaving, she knew that I was coming here. I made that very clear when we started to see each other. And one day I said to her, I was like, do you want to come? Like, let's just go and do this together. And she had, again, just about enough to afford a ticket and to come over here. And so she took that leap, and we booked a ticket. We booked the first couple of weeks in Enderley Avenue in Surfers Paradise, just down the road from where we are now. And that was it. We had nothing. We had about $2,000 between us, which it's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
But we knew that this is where we both wanted to be, and we just did our best to make it work.
Mate, amazing. There's a lot of people that will be inspired by that anyway in itself, that you had the guys to just stop, draw a line in the sand and go, all right, well, I needed... You took an external factor, the redundancy, to actually make that leap, but then you did. You jumped on a plane, you came over here with Sash, who's amazing as well. I know I'm her favourite person in this office as well. But then you came and you worked at the old company that I worked at, mate. And I remember you being there eating sandwiches out of foil and some chips. And now I look at you. You've got obviously you're based in Toowoomba, but you're leading towards buying your own property. You drive a Mercedes, mate. In as much detail or as little detail as you want, talk us from that journey, from arriving here with nothing, being in a cold call centre, making $200-300 a day, to now heading up operations with an international company. Yeah,
it's an interesting one. So you're right, when we first got here, we used to go to Woolies and buy a roll of Devon, the luncheon meat.
Yeah.
And we used to have that with a loaf of bread, a packet of Smiths and some ketchup. And that was our lunch for every single day.
I remember it so clearly, yeah.
And then we did progress, we did upgrade from there. We went to chicken and brown rice. That was about 6 months. Then we switched it up, sausages and brown rice. But yeah, it was very simple. We didn't have too much, and our relationship to begin with, it was tough, man. We were on the other side of the world together. That was the first time Sasha had ever left the country, ever been on a plane, and she decided that she was going to give up her flat and come to the other side of the world with me. And we'd only been together for 8 months or something at that stage.
Working together.
And working together every day in the same team, and it was really, really difficult to begin with. So we've been on our own journey, but yeah, we were working there for 6 months in the call centre, as you said, between $200-400 per day, determining whether or not people had between 25 to 50 grand in the bank for an investment, which is quite an intrusive question when you're on the phone for less than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of rejection in that role, but we made the most of it. We did what we had to. And then we had to do 3 months of farm work, of regional work, as you'll well know. Being on the visa that we were on, that was a requirement to secure our second year. So we did that. We went to a place in Weewar, and that unfortunately was not a great experience. So Sasha was working, looking after the kids, and she was working from sort of 5:30, 6 in the morning till about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in the evening, every single day. We were told we were going to have weekends off, and that didn't happen because we were at a point where we didn't have enough time to go and find somewhere else. So you suck up the situation that you're in, because if you leave, you're going back to the UK.
Yeah.
You've got no choice. So I was, we were on a cotton farm. I was out planting cotton seeds. I was servicing tractors. I was cleaning out combine harvesters and all of that sort of stuff, like just doing everything that we needed to get that second year. We completed that, and then came back to the coast and started working at the other company again, the same company, sorry. This time I was on the phone to begin with, but then I was asked to do their customer service side of things. So I was installing the program on people's computers and helping them through that process. And then unfortunately that company shut down, and again we were left with, we've got no financial support, no government support. The wage that we were on was useless, so we could just about cover our wage, our bills, and we didn't have anything, no nest egg. There was nothing being put away, so we lost our job, and that was it. No family, no nothing. It was, what do we do, sort of thing, you know. And that was in August of 2014, and ISR had been around for a little while and obviously just getting going. And at that time, it was the process of recruitment and then following on with the training and getting people work. So fortunately I'd worked with you, I knew that was what you were doing, so I came to ISR and asked for some help. I was lucky to get that help. Came in, did the interview process, secured a couple of offers, and then ended up working with Sharples in an advertising position, again on the phone, trying to sell advertising space. And I struggled with that. The only reason I'm in this position now is because Sasha took it upon herself, if you remember, to book me in for a coaching session with you.
Yeah. And she called me.
Yeah. And she sort of like, we couldn't afford to do that, and you were kind enough to give me that session for free. So I came in, did that session.
Which is not common practice.
Did that session, and then I knew that I wanted to make something of myself. I knew that I wasn't going to get this far and give it all up and have to return to the UK. I didn't want to go back to, because I knew that as soon as I was back around the circles that I was in, I'd have fell straight back into the life that I did have.
I wanted to ask you that just before you go on, because or what I'm hearing is like just resilience and a relentless attitude of never give up. Like, I don't care whether we're on our arse, we've got absolutely nothing. I'm picking cotton. Sasha's working 7 days a week, 12, 13, 14-hour days.
Yep.
We have to move to Toowoomba. I'm still going. Where does that drive come from? Is it that, and I remember we had a conversation, you had a conversation with Jack as well about, mate, where do you fit within this company now? You move into Toowoomba. Like, we'd never had virtual staff, and you're like, I'll make my own role. I'll make something happen.
Yeah.
Is it because of what I think you're about to say, is that you know if you go back to the UK, you're going to fall back into the same circles? Do you fear going backwards massively?
Yeah, I'm a very impressionable person. I'm easily manipulated. I have been easily manipulated. That's something that I've worked on myself, but I knew, or I was very confident, that if I did go back to where I came from, that I would just, it's too easy to find yourself back in that situation. So I feel like I would have very quickly returned to what I was doing, and it didn't serve me at all. Like I said, it's more of an existence. And I didn't want to go back into that narrow-minded nature of everybody around me and not actually achieving too many things. It was only at the age of 16 that I met the first person that owned their own car, their own business, and their own house, and that was success to me. Like, you are killing it.
Yeah.
You've got a business and a house. Wow. And so that wasn't something that was commonplace, but when I saw that, I knew I wanted it. I knew I wanted to achieve that for myself. So yeah, I think the resilience comes from not wanting to go back to that and wanting so much more for myself. And I had seen it in Mum as well. Obviously, she'd worked many jobs to keep us going, and she'd always, over the years, she had always bettered our situation. We went from, for example, me and my brother sharing a mattress on the floor in a little 2-bedroom council house to then go into a 3-bedroom place, and we each had our own room, and little things like that, the small upgrades, the incremental upgrades, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so that's what I think a large portion of seeing and witnessing that when I was younger has instilled that in me.
Yeah.
So yeah, back to the story. We obviously did the farm work. We came back from that, and it didn't stop there. I got a job, but it didn't offer any long-term sort of security in this country. So Sasha then had to go and study it essentially bought us another 2.5 years. So she was studying childcare, and in that time she was also working while studying. So she was doing 7 days a week again for another couple of years. So she's taken massive sacrifices to get us to the point that we are now. So yeah, so I'd witness that. I'd be inspired by her doing all that sort of stuff for us as well. And then after her having completed that 2.5 years, the option was that we needed to go and find a regional sponsor. And we were first presented with a choice it was near Mount Isa somewhere, hours inland. And like, if we'd have had to have done that, we'd have done it. But luckily, the person that Sasha was working for had a childcare centre in Toowoomba that was going to be opening up. So that's why we are now 1 year and 3 months into our sentence in Toowoomba.
Sorry to anybody in Toowoomba listening.
Yeah.
Big fan base.
So yeah, that's the journey, man. It's been a tough one, but in the back of my mind, it's always been, this is where I've always wanted to be since the time when I was 13 years old in Port Macquarie.
Amazing.
Thanks, Roy. If you're watching, cheers, mate.
Yeah.
Changed my life.
It is. I've got my own Roy. I've got Merv, my Scottish friend, that kind of really hammered home to me the idea of living with regrets and making sure I don't do that. So I'm ever thankful for that. And that's kind of where I want to finish this today, is talking about gratitude. One thing that you do very well, better than most people here, I think, at this company, even though we have gratitude sessions, is you have an ability to constantly look back and remember really vividly the moments where you were worse off. So you're always appreciating today, and you're living in the now. Is that something that you practice? Have you got like a gratitude routine? Do you sit down on a weekly, monthly basis and you go, okay, today Sasha and I are going to sit and talk about what we're grateful for? And if so, have you got any tips for any people that maybe are constantly feeling that they're not they're not happy, they're always chasing the next thing as opposed to just being thankful for what they have?
Yeah, good question. I don't have a gratitude routine, so to speak, but I do have, what I like to do is put myself into a position in which I am grateful. So for example, I'll go to when I was on the Gold Coast, I would go and I'd ride my bike. I love riding my bike because that takes me back to my childhood.
Bumped into you a couple of times?
Yeah, you do. I'd go for a ride on the bike and I'd sit by the beach, and like beaches weren't commonplace. It was thick mud or stones in the UK. Western super mud is what we used to call our closest beach. Yeah. And so like just being there was like, wow, like I'm on one of the most incredible, most beautiful beaches in the world. I'm grateful for this firstly, but then I'd sit in that state, and I've got a list on my phone of all the things that I am grateful for. But a large portion of it comes from, like you said, just looking back and remembering where and what I come from. Because we never had too much, I'll always remember that. That'll always motivate me to achieve more. I'm so grateful for everything that I do have, but I always want more. I'll never forget where I came from. I'll never forget my roots, for example. So in terms of a gratitude routine, that doesn't necessarily exist for me, but I can always look back and be like, wow, I remember when I didn't have anything. I didn't have this, I didn't have that. Now look at me. I could, like, even at the weekend, for example, I'm going out, we've got a puppy, Biggie, his name is, he's a legend, and we went and bought him a load of treats. We spent like 30 or 40 bucks on treats, which is not a large amount of money. But back in the day, I didn't have 50p to go and catch the bus into town.
Yeah. Well.
So I can look back and be like, wow, like I can go to a shop now and not have to worry about spending $30, $40 on anything that I want.
But not take it for granted, still appreciate it.
100%, right, yeah.
Does that coincide with the work that you've put in to put you? This is not by accident, right? You've put yourself in the position enough times and put yourself around the right people now that you've made it happen. So you appreciate it more as well.
Yeah, 100%. The work that we've put in definitely does come into the equation for sure. We've worked so hard. I mean, I know this is only a brief introduction to my journey and everything that we've been through, but there's obviously so much more in behind it.
Sure.
This has been a plan. I don't know, I'm looking like this is going to tell me. We've been doing this for 6.5 years now, and it's calculated. We know we've got that end goal, but that end goal will always change.
Sure.
But in terms of being grateful, it's just purely because I know where I came from and what I had or didn't have. So I can look at the things that I do have now and be like, this is crazy.
I like what you said right in the middle there. You said that you're still ambitious, right? So you're grateful. There's always somebody worse off. I've been that person that's been worse off. Like, you remember those situations really clearly.
Yep.
But that doesn't stop you being ambitious and wanting more, right? There's nothing wrong with that. They coexist.
Yeah. My best becomes my worst then. You mentioned that I drive a Mercedes now, for example. And I walk out into the garage, a double garage that houses both of my cars. That in itself is crazy. But I walk out to the garage and I'm like, wow, like I drive a
still
Mercedes.
today.
Yeah. It's 15 years old. It's an old car, but it's a Mercedes. It's my car. I own that car. So I still look at that and I'm like, I'm driving a Merc, man. But by the same token, that now becomes my worst.
Yeah.
I'll move past that. I'll get a newer Merc. It might only be 1, 2, 3 years newer, but it's better. Upgrade is the word that I said to you. We started
progression, not perfection.
Yeah, absolutely. We started off in Endley Avenue, and we'd always go and look at apartments that we couldn't afford. We could never afford the apartments, but we ended up living there. So we'd go to this place and we'd look at it and be like, and then we'd take a step up. We went from 1 bedroom to 2 bedrooms. We went from 1 bathroom to 2 bathrooms. And every single time it's just been that slight upgrade, the progression, as you mentioned, and I will always continue living like that. I'll always continue upgrading slightly, but I will never ever forget where and what I came from.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Awesome. And I think when you do that, if you ever lost everything, which we all can do, we can lose everything overnight, you'll never lose your integrity, you'll never lose your honesty, you'll never lose who you are as a person. So if you wound up back in a 1-bedroom apartment, you'll still be just as happy as you are right now. You'll still be grateful.
Yeah, I've got a roof over my head.
Yeah, mate. Amazing. Michael Real, thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it. Guys, so that was Mikel Real, Head of Operations. His contact details will be ready for you below this podcast if you're watching this on YouTube. Otherwise, stay tuned for our next episode where we're going to be talking to other ISR staff members.
Thank you very much.